Hello and welcome. My name is Miguel, also known as Chaplain Ramos, or as many inmates call me, Chap. Today I want to talk to you briefly about the history of correctional chaplains. To understand the full concept of the history of correctional chaplains, from its beginning through the present day, we will probably need to talk about three important topics in correction, such as the criminology and its relationship of criminal behavior, the philosophy and its relationship of criminal behavior, and the psychology and its relationship of criminal behavior. But that we will do on another teaching setting of correctional chaplain. Today I want to go through three sections. One, the biblical character in prisons. Two, correctional chaplains in the early 17th century. And three, the correctional chaplains in the 21st century. Following the Apostle Paul's injunction in Hebrews 13:3 that states, "Remember those in prison as if you were their fellow prisoners, and those who are mistreated as if you yourself were suffering." Typically, this means something such as pray for the prisoners, sympathize with the prisoners, call attention to the prisoners, and use our freedom to help the prisoners. Throughout the history of correction, religious persons and religious institutions have greatly influenced the treatment of offenders. The actual establishment of prisons and penitentiaries were a religious idea to allow the offenders to obtain penance for his or her crime, make amends, and convert while being isolated from others. However, most significant influence was the establishment of a regular chaplaincy. The influence and practice of religion in the correctional was probably carried out by religious men who they themselves were in imprisonment, such as Joseph, falsely accused of sexual harassment. In Genesis 39:19-21 says, "So it was when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, 'Your servant did to me after this manner,' that his anger was arose. Then Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and he gave him favor in the sight of the keepers of the prison." Jeremiah, charged with treason and put in prison to die. Jeremiah 37:11-16, that says, "After the Babylonian army had withdrawn from Jerusalem because of Pharaoh's army, Jeremiah started to leave the city to go to the territory of Benjamin to get his share of the property among the people there. But when he reached the Benjamin gates, the captain of the guards, whose name was Uriah, son of Shelemiah, the son of Hananiah, arrested him and said, 'You are deserting to the Babylonians.' 'That's not true,' Jeremiah said. 'I am not deserting to the Babylonians.' But Uriah would not listen to him. Instead, he arrested Jeremiah and brought him to the officials. They were angry with Jeremiah and had him beaten and imprisoned in the house of Jonathan, the secretary, which they had made into a prison. John the Baptist, in prison for speaking the truth. Matthew 14:3-4 says, "Now Herod had arrested John and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. For John has been saying to him, 'It is not lawful for you to have her.'" Jesus, arrested by the betrayal of Judas for money, then in prison for false accusation and preaching and teaching in secretly. Matthew 26:49-51 says, "Go at once to Jesus," Judas said, "Greeting, Rabbi," and kissed him. And Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend." Then the man stepped forward seized Jesus and arrested him. Peter and John, arrested for preaching Jesus. Act 4:1-3 says, "The priests and the captain of the temple guard and the Sadducees came up to Peter and John while they were speaking to the people. They were greatly disturbed because the apostles were teaching the people, proclaiming in Jesus the resurrection of the dead. They seized Peter and John, and because it was evening, they put them in jail until the next day." Paul, because the people did not believe his testimony and experience with God, in Act 21:28 down to 33 and 28 says, shouting, "Fellow Israelites, help us. This is the man who teaches everyone everywhere against our people and our law and this place. And besides, he has brought Greeks into the temple and defiled this holy place." In verse 33 says, "The commander came up and arrested him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. So the chaplain's contribution to the history of the prison is probably one of the most important yet underrated of all the members of the prison staff. There is still no chronicle of the perceived rise or fall in the fortune of the chaplains in the prisons, and so it is difficult to pinpoint exactly why and when the chaplains, who at one stage was possibly the most powerful individual in the whole institution, merited this loss of academic interest. What is certain is that the chaplains have been a legal requirement in the prison for well over 230 years. Consequently, these religious ministers have played and may still play an important part in not only the development of the institution itself, but also in the life of numerous prisoners that have suffered or rejoiced at the hands of the prison chaplain. The most superficial glance at the design of the monastery, a building occupied by a community of monks living under religious vows, and the prison, a building in which people are legally held as a punishment for a crime they have committed, becomes impossible not to notice the close resemblance between the two institutions. The intention of both being are to bring about the repentance of an alleged sinners, although by quite different means. In 1553, the first house of correction was opened in London. This house of correction was originally a royal place near a spring called Bridget Well, or Bridgewell, as many subsequent houses of correction were referred to as Bridgewells. The Bridgewell was one of several prototypes which developed in Britain, Europe, and North America over the next 300 years that held mostly petty offenders, beggars, and disorderly local poor people. Before 1775, imprisonment was subordinated in several punishments, most notably penal transportation, and hanging. According to Christian writers, Constantine, the great Roman emperor, was over 40 when he finally declared himself a Christian, making it clear that he owed his successors to the protection of the Christian high God alone. Constantine was the first emperor to stop the persecution of Christians and to legalize Christianity, along with others religious cult in the Roman Empire. Throughout this day, Constantine granted place of safety to criminals who would otherwise have been mutilated or killed. In the 18th century, England, protecting the privatized Englishmen and a large number of convictions under the capital statutes, only a small number of felons were actually executed and were able to establish a code, combining majesty, justice, and mercy. V.A.C. Gartrell, in his book titled Brilliant Details, The Mockery of His System of Mercy for the King, claims that the code could only remain effective if 90% of the convicted were forgiven. To accomplish VAC cartel code, the justice statutes becomes an integrate for those who help the convicted achieve of privilege with a local priest and share the glory. The clergy, also known as the prison chaplain, although still in a development stage in the plan of the code, provided a prominent role in dealing with those awaiting execution. Isolating offenders from fellow prisoners became the accepted correctional practice. It was though that long-term isolation combined with in-depth discussions with clergy that will lead inmates to repent or become penitent, sorry for their sins, and the clergy not only help prepare petitions for mercy to the king, but also minister to those who wanted to hear the mercy of God. Chaplaincy work was probably created informally during the early years of the Christian church, but became formal in the late 1400s when the religious Order of Misericordia was founded to provide assistance and consolation to those condemned to death. However, in 1722, the British Parliament authorized court to appoint chaplains to all the prisons. Indeed, there was little profit in catering for the prisoner's spiritual need, while those chaplains who show an interest in their captive parishioners were often unwelcome. They were viewed as interfering by the prison staff. Another reason the prison chaplains may not have been welcome in the prison was due to their overall unpopularity. According to Hay, the clergies were lazy, absentee, and dominated by material ambitions. However, one who did intervene with the unwelcoming of chaplains was Methodist minister John Wesley. John Wesley preached monthly to prisoners at Oxford Castle, while his brother Charles Wesley regularly visited Newgate Prison in the city of London, England, and even composing hymns for the condemned. However, it was the work of a Christian reformer, John Howard, that left the most lasting impression within the prison system. John Howard was appointed as a High Sheriff of Bedfordshire in 1773 and subsequently studied the jails in England and ultimately changed the purpose of the prison and the chaplain's role within the prison system. In 1773, John Howard and Congress authorized the appointment and payment for the prison chaplains. The act of employment of chaplains required that the chaplain should read in the morning and evening prayers each Sunday, Good Friday, and Christmas, preach 2 sermons each Sabbath, and all prisoners will attend the chapel service. Furthermore, it was a requirement that the prison chaplain visit any of the inmates either sick or in good health that may desire or stand in need of his or her spiritual need. However, when John Howard visited Newgate Prison in 1775, he discovered that the chaplains could not demand compulsory, obligated chaplain attendance. This option was overturned by the provision of the Penitentiary Act in 1779. However, in 1779, an option by the British Act of Legislature overturned a provision which the Penitentiary Act that was drafted by John Howard and William Blackstone, recommending imprisonment based on religious instruction as an alternative sentence to death or the penal transportation, also known as the prison hawk, which is a prison ship. In 1779, a committee recommended that each prison hawk be appointed a chaplain to spend 12 hours a day performing their duties. On the opening of Pentonville Model Prison in Barnsboy, London in 1842, the system of separate confinement was established with the intention of isolating inmates in individual cells for up to 23 hours a day, where they were to reflect on their past sins, repent, and reach a state of reform, guided by the self-visitation of the chaplains and their solitary reading of the Bible and other religious texts. Philip Presley has encapsulated the tension between the act of faith for the majority of Victorian prisoners, the angelical communion, which was experienced by prisoners as unmistakable disciplinary proceeding as they were marched in silence to chapel and seated in separate cell. The perception of chaplains as an important part of the whole system, rather than the spiritual only, is enhanced further in 1850 when chaplains were entrusted to perform secular duties as the role of head of education. The reading jail chaplain, as they were called because they had to read, had lessons in the morning, noon, and night, and the Bible was the chief lesson book. It was committed to memorize several chapters, 2 or 3 Gospels, even almost the whole New Testament was sometimes learned by extremely intellectual felons. The introduction of the Prison Ministry Act in 1863, authorizing the appointment of non-angelical chaplains, was controversial, and selected committee in 1870 looking at the work of the Prison and Prison Minister Act in relationship to chaplains not belonging to established church. The Prison Act in 1865 stipulated that every prison must appoint a chaplain, being a clergyman of an established church, and at the time they recommended a Roman Catholic chaplain, while also the prison rules in 1877 was to name the chaplain a medieval officer and the governor as the supreme officer of the prison. The chaplain, in the course of his duties, spent more of his time and more time that stretched in the cells than any other prisoners. However, Hubhouse and Brockway, in their report called English Prison Today, being the report of the Prison System Inquiry, noted that under the present system, the chaplains are too much under the control of the commissioner, far too deeply involved in officialdom, that as a rule, they have a great too many duties to perform, too many prisoners to visit, too many forms to fill out, too many routine and secular work, and lastly, that their Christian work is hampered and almost fatally by the repressive, thoroughly unchristian character of the system in which they are involved. In 1895, the Gladstone Committee in England approved measures to bring visiting preachers or volunteers into prison to ease the repetition and routine for prisoners. As part of the advocacy of the relaxation in the discipline of the prison system, in the early 20th century, one minister evidence urged more provision for creative activity and diversion, more association between prisoners, and wider engagement by prison staff with the reformative side of prison work. It was until 1920s, 1930s, the prison chaplain was often the only professional person employed full-time by the prison except the warden. But gradually, educators, social workers, psychologists, medical personnel, and recreational specialists were added to prison staff and began to take over functions from which the chaplains had been responsible. The change forced a re-examination of the clergy's role on doing pastoral function. Hubhouse and Brockway in 1922 also concluded that as a rule, the devotional life in chapel suffers almost as severely as the personal interviews from the fact that those who conduct the service are recognized as part of the prison regime and therefore are incapable of yielding to the intent fruits of love, joy, and peace. Society in the 21st century may intend prison to be a place of punishment, but God can use it as a place of refinement and transformation. God does not give up on those in prison, but pursue them in love and give hope for the second chance in life. As correctional chaplains with the higher percentage of Protestants and Catholic chaplains, the chaplaincy becomes increasingly threatened in the late 1960s with a large number of Buddhists, Muslims, and Hindus prisoners among the prison community, especially in the early 1960s. The prison chaplain is a minister to everybody and everything within the prison walls. Pound, Atherton, and Dowriel stated that although chaplains exercise their personal minister outside the prison walls, the prison chaplain's primary duty is to minister to prisoners and prisoners of other faith, as well as responsible for the spiritual welfare of the prison staff. It is the responsibility of the prison chaplain to balance the religious rights of inmates with the correctional institution needs for safety and security, a balance which must be constantly negotiated. In the prison chaplain, by fulfilling these roles, the chaplain becomes the prophet, the priest, and the pastor to the prison institution. One correctional officer observed that the prison chaplain was there to hear of the prison, be part of the prison that is purely there to listen to, rather than watch prisoners. Within the limitation of the prison system, the chaplaincy formed a humane and safe space, and as one prisoner observing the chaplains can build up a relationship with that feels more equally that they are there to help. Every prison correctional chaplains is expected to have a calling to prison ministry. And believe me when I say you should have the calling to prison ministry. It takes more than just doing a chapel service in prison. It takes qualities such as sincerity, sensitivity, spirituality, and special training that must possess the ability to relate to the prisoners in a non-judgmental manner. Today, prison chaplains carry out a range of duties and roles within the prison system. In addition to pastoral care, prison or correctional chaplains must meet new prisoners, visit prisoners who are sick or in segregation, and take on the difficult task of informing prisoners about the death of relative. The role of the prison chaplain extends far beyond an exclusively faith-based remit into the center of everyday life within the personal community. Exploring the history of prison chaplain and how they are measured, considering the historic role of prison chaplains in the United States and the United Kingdom, mass imprisonment may become an intentionally phenomenon with the United States and the United Kingdom at the center of this model penal development contextually and globally. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, 2.3 million people are locked up in more than 6,000 correctional facilities operated by thousands of agencies across the United States in 2019. The United States general population is approximately 300 million. In the United Kingdom, the focus of Scotland and England and Wales, the Howard League for Prison Reform notes that the prison population of England and Wales is 82,905 in 2019. The general population of England and Wales is 58.3 million. For Scotland, the prison population is a little over 8,000. Scotland's general population is 5.4 million according to the population of the United Kingdom. In South Africa, according to the World Prison Brief data, the prison population is approximately 164,129 with a general population of 57.7 million. In the Philippines, the prison population is approximately 215,000. The general population is 106.7 million. The Russian Federation prison population is approximately 499,406 prisoners, with a general population of 144.5 million. In the island of Puerto Rico, the prison population is 10,475 prisoners, with a general population of 3.1 million. In Mexico, the prison population is approximately 198,384 prisoners, with the generation population of 126.2 million of 218. According to Allison labeling, prison implies the social, emotional, organization, and physical characters of the correctional institution as perceived by inmates and staff. Generally associated with the lack of liberty, prisons function in a place for punishment. However, prison reflects characteristics that are both homogeneous and heterogeneous. Some homogeneous characteristics include the concept and practices associated with prison management, the harshness of the management practice, while heterogeneous includes the characteristic of individual prison and their treatment of prisoners to be successful upon release. The impact of a negative or positive prison is shown in the prison institution and post-prison experience of prisoners after release. The environment in any prison contribution to the possibility of success rehabilitation and regeneration of prisons. The argument in this is that while prison research experts have eloquently articulated the principles and concepts associated with measuring the atmosphere of prison, isn't it appropriate to include the peculiar perspective of prison chaplain in determining the characteristics and traits of healthy or unhealthy prison in the United States, the United Kingdom, and the prison system around the world? Yes. Based on this historic role in the development of this model penal system around the world, prison chaplains are absolutely necessary to the development of procedures and concepts associated with the measurements of prison environment across the world. Through prison chaplains have received little scholarly attention, there is a growing interest in assessing the effect of religious programming on inmates to adjust and to reduce recidivism. O'Connor and Periclear says, there is a deep-held belief among many in the United States that religion plays a profound and necessary role in the creation and maintenance of a moral and law-abiding community. Indeed, this kind of belief is the social effect of religion practice that has inspired a great deal of religiously motivated social action aimed at rehabilitating criminals in the United States. Perhaps chaplains have been a historic part of the development of prison in the United States and the United Kingdom as pastoral caregivers, as well as moral and ethical facilitators around the world. This research shows that prison chaplains are no less important than they were, especially taking into consideration the massive increase of prison after 1970. In context that prison chaplains execute their duties in prison, prison chaplains function as risk managers to provide a peaceful environment through Jesus Christ. However, they are also engaged in managing the spiritual, emotional, and psychological need of prisoners. Prison chaplains are constantly confronted with the existential feeling of deep anxiety of imprisonment and the depth of human flaw in the prison environment. The prison chaplain navigate the experience through their religious understanding, the skills, the training, and the faith community. With this, I conclude. It is necessary for prison research experts, prison managers, and policymakers to view the opinion and experience of prison chaplain as realistically indispensable of a daily management of prison and measurements of their environment, not only across the United States and the United Kingdom, but throughout the world, if the prison system wants to reduce recidivism. And that is important. God bless.